The rain came without warning. One moment, the sky above Kensington Palace was pale gray. The next, it turned black as coal. Thunder rolled across London like a drum, low and angry. Inside the East Wing, Kate Middleton stood near a tall window. She wasn't supposed to be there. Not alone. Not this late, but earlier that evening, she'd received a call. An old friend from university was in crisis. Kate had slipped away from her schedule to make time for a private phone conversation. The room she chose was quiet, tucked away on the third floor, a place rarely used anymore. Outside, the wind began to scream. Kate pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. The window rattled in its frame. She turned away, deciding it was time to leave. But as she reached for the door, the lights flickered once. Twice. Then the room went dark. Her breath caught. She reached for her phone. The screen lit up her face in the blackness. No signal. The storm must have knocked out the tower nearby. She exhaled slowly, trying to calm the rising flutter in her chest. Then she heard it. A groan, deep, metal bending somewhere. Above her, Kate froze. The sound came again. Louder this time, like the building itself was in pain. Before you go further into this story, if you love hearing real, emotional moments that stay with you long after they end, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next. Kate moved toward the door, her hand shaking slightly as she turned the handle. It didn't move. She tried again, stuck. The old wood had swollen in the sudden humidity. Panic flickered in her mind, but she forced it down. She was Kate Middleton. She'd faced press storms, royal protocol, and the weight of the world's eyes. A stuck door was nothing. She pulled harder, still nothing. Then the ceiling cracked, not loud. Just a whisper of splitting plaster. A thin line appeared above her head, barely visible in the phone's dim glow. Dust drifted down like snow. Her heart began to race. She pounded on the door. "Hello? Is anyone there?" Silence. The storm swallowed her voice. Kate backed away from the door, her mind racing. This wing was old. Renovations had been delayed for years. She remembered someone mentioning the roof needed work, but no one thought it was urgent. Another crack. This one sharper. She looked up. The line in the ceiling had grown. It split into smaller veins, spreading like a spider web. More dust fell. She could hear the rain now, drumming harder, heavier. The roof was taking on water. Too much water. Kate moved to the far corner of the room, pressing herself against the wall. Her phone screen dimmed to save battery. The darkness closed in. She thought of William, of George, Charlotte, Louis. She thought of how strange it would be if something happened here. In this forgotten room, in this storm no one saw coming. Then she heard footsteps, fast, running. Someone shouted her. Name. The door shuddered. Once, twice, then it exploded inward. A figure stood in the doorway, backlit by emergency lights in the hallway. A palace guard. His uniform soaked through, his face pale and urgent. "Ma'am," he gasped. "We need to go now." But before Kate could move, the ceiling above her gave one final, terrible groan, and then it began to fall. Asterisk time slowed. Kate saw the crack widen above her, saw the plaster buckle, saw the guard's eyes go wide with terror. He lunged forward, his hand closed around her wrist like iron. He yanked her toward him with a force that sent her stumbling. She crashed into his chest just as the ceiling gave way behind her. The sound was deafening. Wood, plaster, and metal beams came down in a roar. The floor shook. Dust exploded into the hallway, choking the air. Kate couldn't see, couldn't breathe. The guard's arm was around her, pulling her forward. Away from the collapsing room, they ran. Her shoes slipped on the polished floor. The guard held her upright, his grip never loosening. Behind them, the destruction spread. Another section of ceiling fell. Then another. The storm had found the palace's weakness and was tearing it apart. They reached the stairwell. The guard pulled the door open and shoved her through. Kate grabbed the railing, her legs shaking. She looked back at him. His face was covered in white dust. Blood ran from a cut above his eye. "Keep moving," he said, his voice hoarse. They descended the stairs 2 at a time. Kate's mind was spinning. What just happened? How close had she come to being crushed? The questions swirled, but her body moved on instinct. Following the guard's lead, on the second floor, they met another guard running up. His eyes widened when he saw Kate. "Ma'am, thank God. We've been trying to reach you. The whole East Wing is compromised." "She's safe," the first guard said, still holding Kate's arm gently, but firmly. "We need to get her to the main building." The second guard nodded and spoke into his radio. Static crackled back. The storm was still disrupting communications. They moved through the corridor. Emergency lights cast long shadows. Somewhere in the distance, an alarm began to wail. Kate's ears were ringing from the collapse. Everything felt surreal, like she was watching herself from outside her own body. The guard who'd saved her stayed close. She glanced at him. Mid-30s, maybe. Strong jaw. Eyes that kept scanning every doorway, every window. He moved like someone trained for crisis. Calm. Focused. "What's your name?" Kate asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked at her, surprised. "Officer Daniel Brooks, ma'am." "Thank you, Daniel." He nodded once, a quick dip of his head, but said nothing. There was no time for gratitude ceremonies. Not yet. They reached a connecting hallway that led to the main palace building. Rain lashed against the windows. Lightning flashed, throwing everything into sharp relief for a split second. Kate saw the gardens outside, flooded and wild. Then the lights went out completely. Total darkness. Kate's breath hitched. She felt Daniel's hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "It's all right," he said quietly. "Stay close to me." The second guard clicked on a flashlight. The beam cut through the black, shaking slightly. They continued forward, slower now, feeling their way along the wall. Kate's heart was still pounding. The adrenaline hadn't worn off. Her mind kept replaying the moment the ceiling cracked. The sound of it. The dust falling like a warning. If Daniel hadn't reached her in time, she pushed the thought away. They turned a corner. The flashlight beam swept across the hallway and stopped. Water. A pool of it, spreading across the floor from under a doorway. It was already an inch deep and rising. The storm had breached the building in multiple places. "Can't go this way," the second guard said. Daniel cursed under his breath. He looked back the way they'd come, then forward again. "The west stairwell. It's our only option." But the west stairwell was on the other side of the flooding corridor. Kate looked at the water. It didn't look deep yet, but she could hear it. A steady drip from somewhere above. The ceiling here was compromised too. Daniel met her eyes. "We have to move fast." "Can you do that?" Kate nodded. He took her hand. His grip was warm, solid, real. "Stay with me," he said, and then they stepped into the water. Asterisk, the water was cold. Shockingly cold, it soaked through Kate's shoes instantly, numbing her feet. She gripped Daniel's hand tighter as they waded forward. The flashlight beam danced across the surface, making the water look deeper than it was. But it was rising. Kate could feel it. With every step, the level crept higher. Ankle deep now. The current was gentle but constant, flowing from somewhere deeper in the building. "Faster," Daniel urged. They moved as quickly as they could. The water pulled at Kate's legs, making each step harder. Behind her, the second guard kept a flashlight trained on their path. The beam flickered once. The battery was dying. Thunder crashed directly overhead. The whole building shuddered. Kate's foot slipped. She went down hard, her knee hitting the floor beneath the water. Pain shot up her leg. Daniel caught her before she went under completely, hauling her back to her feet. "I've got you," he said. She nodded, biting back a gasp. Her knee throbbed, but she could still walk. They kept moving. The doorway to the west stairwell appeared ahead. 20 feet, 15, 10. Then the lights came back on, harsh, fluorescent, blinding after the darkness. Kate blinked, her eyes adjusting. For a moment she felt relief. Light meant power. Power meant help was coming, But then she looked up. The ceiling above them was sagging. Badly, water dripped from a dozen places, streaming down in thin rivulets. The plaster was dark with moisture, bulging downward like a blister ready to burst. "Run," Daniel shouted. They ran. Kate's injured knees screamed in protest, but adrenaline drowned it out. The water splashed around them. 5 feet from the stairwell door. 3. The ceiling gave way. Not all at once, just a section. But it was directly above them. Daniel shoved Kate forward with everything he had. She flew through the stairwell doorway, crashing into the wall on the other side. The second guard dove after her. Daniel was right behind them. Almost the debris came down like a waterfall. Chunks of plaster, wood beams, and gallons of trapped rainwater. It hit the floor where they'd been standing seconds before. The sound was like an explosion. Kate spun around. Daniel was on the ground just inside the stairwell. A beam had clipped his shoulder. He was conscious, but his face was twisted in pain. "Daniel." Kate dropped beside him. "I'm fine," he grunted, but he wasn't. His shoulder was bleeding, his uniform torn. The second guard was already on his radio, shouting for medical assistance, for backup, for anyone who could hear him. Kate pressed her hand against Daniel's wound. He winced but didn't pull away. His eyes met hers. They were clear, despite the pain. Focused. "You need to keep going," he said. "Not without you." "Not without you," she repeated, her voice firm. The second guard knelt beside them. "Help's coming. But we need to get to the lower level. This stairwell won't hold if the floor above collapses." Kate looked at Daniel. "Can you stand?" He nodded, though his jaw was clenched tight. Together, Kate and the second guard helped him to his feet. He swayed for a moment, then steadied himself. They started down the stairs. Slowly, Daniel leaned heavily on the railing, his injured arm hanging at his side. Kate stayed close, ready to catch him if he fell. The storm raged outside. Through the narrow windows in the stairwell, Kate could see the rain coming down in sheets. The wind howled like something alive. They reached the first-floor landing. The second guard's radio crackled to life. A voice came through, distorted but urgent. "All personnel, evacuate the East Wing immediately. Structural collapse imminent. Repeat, evacuate immediately." Kate's blood went cold. They'd just come from there. If Daniel had been even seconds slower, she looked at him. He was pale, sweating despite the cold. But he was alive. They both were. The main palace entrance was just ahead. Kate could see people now. Security, staff, someone wrapped a blanket around her shoulders the moment she stepped through the door. Hands guided her toward a chair. "I'm fine," she said, pulling away. "He needs help." She pointed at Daniel. 2 medics rushed forward, easing him into a chair. One began examining his shoulder. The other checked his vitals. Kate stood there, dripping water onto the marble floor, watching them work. Her hands were shaking. The adrenaline was finally wearing off, and in its place came the full weight of what had just happened. She could have died tonight. In a forgotten room, in a storm no one predicted, but she didn't, because of him. One of the medics looked up at her. "Ma'am, you should sit down. You might be in shock." Kate ignored him. She walked over to where Daniel sat, his shoulder now bandaged. His eyes lifted to meet hers. "Thank you," she said again. This time, she meant it with everything she had. Daniel managed a small smile. "Just doing my job, ma'am." But they both knew it was more than that. The hours that followed blurred together. Kate sat in a secure room in the main building, wrapped in a dry blanket, sipping tea someone had pressed into her hands. William had been contacted. He was on his way back from an engagement in Scotland. His voice on the phone had been tight with worry, but she'd assured him she was fine, and she was, physically at least. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw the ceiling crack, felt the floor shake, heard Daniel's voice cutting through the chaos. A royal physician examined her. Bruised knee. Minor cuts on her hands from when she'd fallen. Nothing serious. The doctor advised rest. Kate nodded, but she knew she wouldn't sleep tonight. Outside, the storm was finally dying. The rain had softened to a steady drizzle. The wind no longer howled. Emergency crews were inside the East Wing now, assessing the damage. Early reports said it was extensive. 3 rooms completely destroyed. The roof had been compromised in multiple sections. Water damage throughout 2 floors. It would take months to repair, but no one had been killed. No one seriously injured, except Daniel. Kate set down her tea. "Where is he?" she asked the aide standing nearby. "Ma'am." "Officer Brooks, the guard who brought me out." "Where is he?" The aide checked her tablet. "Medical wing. He's receiving treatment for his shoulder injury." "I want to see him." "Ma'am, the doctor said you should rest." Kate stood. The blanket slipped from her shoulders. "I want to see him," she repeated, her tone leaving no room for argument. The aide nodded quickly. "Of course." This way, they walked through the palace corridors. Kate was still in her damp clothes, her hair loose and tangled. She didn't care. Somewhere in those chaotic moments, protocol had lost its grip on her. The medical wing was quiet. A nurse looked up as they approached, her eyes widening when she recognized Kate. "Officer Brooks," Kate said simply. The nurse led her to a small room. Daniel sat on an examination table, his shirt off, his shoulder freshly bandaged. A doctor was giving him instructions about keeping the wound clean. Daniel looked up when Kate entered. He started to stand. "Don't," Kate said, raising a hand. "Please sit." The doctor glanced between them, sensing something unspoken. He excused himself quietly, closing the door behind him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Kate moved closer. In the bright medical light, she could see the full extent of what had happened. The cut above his eye now stitched, the bruising already forming on his shoulder. The exhaustion in his face. "How bad is it?" she asked, nodding toward his shoulder. "Dislocated. They put it back. I'll be fine in a few weeks." Kate nodded slowly. "You saved my life tonight." Daniel looked down at his hands. Don't say you were just doing your job." Kate's voice was gentle but firm. "What you did? The risk you took." She paused, searching for the right words. "I don't know how to thank you for that." Daniel met her eyes. "You don't have to thank me, ma'am. I'd do it again. 100 times. The sincerity in his voice made Kate's throat tight. She sat down in the chair beside the examination table, suddenly feeling the weight of the night pressing down on her. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't come," she said quietly. "If you'd been even a few seconds later, but I wasn't, because you ran toward danger when everyone else was running away from it." Kate shook her head. "That's not just training. That's character." Daniel didn't know what to say to that. He'd never been good with praise. Never expected it. He did his job because it needed doing, because he believed in protecting people. But sitting here, Kate looking at him like he was something more than just a palace guard, he felt something shift. A connection. A moment of understanding between 2 people who'd faced death together. Kate reached out and gently touched his uninjured arm. "You have family?" "A sister. In Manchester. She's a teacher. She must be proud of you." Daniel smiled for the first time since the collapse. "She thinks I'm crazy for doing this job. Says it's too dangerous." "She might have a point," Kate said with a small laugh. The tension broke. For a moment, they were just 2 people sharing a quiet joke in the aftermath of something terrible. Then Kate's phone buzzed. "William?" She glanced at it, then back at Daniel. "I should go," she said, though she didn't move immediately. "But I want you to know. I won't forget this. What you did tonight matters. It matters to me." Daniel nodded. "Take care of that knee, ma'am. Take care of that shoulder." She stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Daniel." "Yes, ma'am?" "When you're healed, I'd like to meet with you again. Properly. To thank you the way you deserve to be thanked." She was gone. Daniel sat alone in the medical room. Staring at the door she'd just walked through, his shoulder throbbed. His whole body ached. But beneath the pain was something else. Pride. Purpose. The feeling that maybe, just maybe, he'd done something that truly mattered tonight. Asterisk, 3 weeks passed. The East Wing remained closed, wrapped in scaffolding and safety tape. Engineers came and went, writing reports, shaking their heads at how close the disaster had come to being so much worse. The press caught wind of the story. Not the full details, those were kept carefully guarded, but enough to run headlines. Storm damages Kensington Palace. Royal residence under repair. Speculation swirled about who had been inside at the time. Kate's office released no statement. Neither did the Palace Guard Division. The story faded from the news cycle within days, replaced by newer scandals and brighter headlines. But inside the palace, people remembered. Daniel returned to work after 2 weeks. His shoulder was still stiff, but functional. He'd done his physical therapy religiously, pushing through the pain because sitting at home drove him mad when he walked into the guard station his first day back. The room went quiet. Then someone started clapping. Within seconds, everyone joined in. Daniel stood there, awkward and embarrassed. As his colleagues applauded him, his supervisor, a gruff man named Patterson, pulled him aside afterward. "Her Royal Highness has requested a meeting with you," Patterson said. Daniel's stomach dropped. "When? Tomorrow." 2 o'clock? Main office? What for? Patterson gave him a look. "You saved her life, Brooks. What do you think it's for?" Daniel had trouble sleeping that night. He kept imagining the meeting. What would he say? How was he supposed to act? He'd been trained in royal protocol, but this felt different, personal. The next day, he put on his dress uniform, checked himself in the mirror 3 times. His hands were sweating. At exactly 2 o'clock, he was escorted to a small private sitting room. Kate was already there, standing by the window, looking out at the gardens. She wore a simple blue dress. Her hair was pulled back elegantly. She turned when he entered. "Daniel," she said warmly, "thank you for coming." "Of course, ma'am." He stood at attention, unsure what to do with his hands. Kate smiled gently. "Please, sit. This isn't a formal meeting." He sat on the edge of an armchair. Kate took the seat across from him. For a moment, she just looked at him as if trying to find the right words. "How's your shoulder?" she asked. "Almost back to normal." "Good. I'm glad." She paused. "I've been thinking a lot about that night, about what you did, and I realized something." Daniel waited. "People in my position receive thanks and honors and recognition all the time," Kate continued. "But the people who truly deserve it, the ones who act without hesitation, who risk everything without expecting anything in return, they often go unnoticed. And that's not right." She reached for a small box on the table beside her. She opened it and removed something. A medal. Simple but elegant. "This is the Royal Victorian Medal," Kate said. "It's given to individuals who have performed personal service to the sovereign or the royal family. Service that goes above and beyond." Daniel's eyes widened. "Ma'am, I didn't do it for recognition." "I know," Kate said softly. "That's exactly why you deserve it." She stood and gestured for him to stand as well. With careful formality, she pinned the medal to his uniform. Her fingers brushed against the fabric, steady and sure. When she stepped back, her eyes were bright. "Thank you, Daniel," she said. "Not just for that night, but for everything you represent: courage, selflessness, duty without expectation of reward. The world needs more people like you." Daniel felt his throat tighten. He'd been a soldier before joining the Palace Guard. He'd seen combat, received commendations, but none of them had felt like this. "It was an honor to help you, ma'am," he managed to say. Kate smiled. Then she did something unexpected. She extended her hand. Daniel shook it. Her grip was firm, warm. "There's something else," Kate said as she released his hand. "I've spoken with the head of security. We're implementing new protocols, better monitoring of structural integrity, faster emergency response systems. What happened that night should never happen again." "That's good to hear. I wanted you involved in developing those protocols," Kate continued. "Your perspective, what you experienced that night, it's valuable. I'd like you to work with the team. If you're willing, we're linked. You want me to help design security improvements?" "I do. You saw firsthand where the failures were. You know what needs to change?" It was more than he'd expected, more than he'd ever imagined. But as he looked at Kate, saw the genuine respect in her eyes, he realized something. This wasn't charity. This wasn't pity. This was recognition of capability. Of worth, I'd be honored, he said. Kate nodded, satisfied. Good. We'll set up a meeting with the security team next week. She walked him to the door. Before he left, she touched his arm lightly. Daniel, I meant what I said that night in the medical wing. I won't forget this. Ever. Neither will I, ma'am. As he walked back through the palace corridors, the medal pinned to his chest, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Real purpose. Not just doing a job, not just following orders, but making a genuine difference in a way that mattered. 6 months later, spring arrived in London. The east wing of Kensington Palace had been fully restored. New roof, reinforced structure, modern safety systems woven invisibly into the historic architecture. The work had been meticulous, expensive, and complete. Daniel Brooks walked through the finished corridors during his patrol, still marveling at the transformation. The room where Kate had been trapped no longer existed in its old form. It had been redesigned, strengthened, made safe, but Daniel could still see it in his mind. The cracked ceiling, the rising water, Kate's face in the dim light. Some memories didn't fade. The protocols he'd helped develop were now standard. Every guard carried upgraded communication devices. Motion sensors tracked movement in all rooms. Structural monitoring systems sent real-time alerts to engineering teams. And emergency evacuation routes had been redesigned, tested, drilled until everyone could navigate them in their sleep. It wasn't perfect. No system ever was. But it was better. Safer. Daniel's supervisor approached him as he finished his patrol. Brooks. Special assignment today. Daniel looked up. What kind of assignment? Ceremony in the main hall. Royal Victorian Medal presentation. You're to stand guard during the proceedings. Patterson paused, then added with a slight smile, thought you might appreciate being there. Given that you've got one of those yourself now. Daniel nodded. He'd worn his medal exactly once since receiving it during an official photograph. The rest of the time it stayed carefully stored in his apartment. He wasn't the type to display such things, but he wore it today, pinned to his dress uniform. The ceremony was small, intimate, just a handful of recipients and their families. Kate was presenting the medals personally. William stood beside her, dignified and proud. Daniel took his position near the door, standing at attention. He watched as Kate greeted each recipient warmly, spoke with them, pinned the medals with care. She had a gift for making people feel seen. Valued, midway through the ceremony, her eyes found his across the room. She smiled, a small private smile meant just for him. An acknowledgement. A shared memory of a night that had changed both of them. Daniel nodded back. Barely perceptible, after the ceremony ended, families mingled over tea and small sandwiches. Daniel remained at his post, watching the room. It was his job. His purpose. Kate excused herself from a conversation and walked toward him. She moved casually, naturally, so as not to draw attention. Officer Brooks, she said when she reached him. Ma'am? How does it feel to see this? Knowing you helped make these ceremonies safer? Daniel considered the question. Good. It feels good to know something positive came from that night. Kate nodded. We often can't control what happens to us. But we can control what we do with it afterward. You chose to help make things better. That says everything about who you are. You chose the same thing, ma'am. These safety improvements were your idea. Our idea, Kate corrected gently. They stood there for a moment. Two people connected by circumstances neither had wanted, but both had survived. My children ask about you sometimes, Kate said, her voice quieter now. George especially. He knows a guard helped me during the storm. He thinks you're a superhero. Daniel felt his face warm. I'm no superhero, ma'am. But you're someone worth looking up to. And in a world that often feels chaotic and uncertain, that matters more than you know. Before Daniel could respond, William approached. Kate introduced them properly. They shook hands. William thanked Daniel with the same sincerity. Kate had shown that first night in the medical wing. Then the royal couple moved on, greeting other guests. Fulfilling their duties, Daniel returned to his post by the door. The afternoon light streamed through the palace windows, golden and warm. Outside, spring flowers bloomed in the gardens. Inside, people laughed and celebrated small acts of heroism, small moments of grace. Daniel thought about the man he'd been before that stormy night. A good guard, competent, reliable, but not someone who saw beyond the immediate task. He thought about the man he was now. Someone who understood that duty wasn't just about following orders. It was about being present in the moments that mattered, about acting when action was needed, even when it came with risk. Kate had taught him that, not through words, but through her example. The way she'd refused to leave him injured, the way she'd turned trauma into positive change, the way she'd seen him not as just a uniform, but as a person, and in return, he'd given her what he could. His courage, his quick thinking, his willingness to step between her and danger without hesitation. In the end, that night hadn't just been about a storm and a collapsing roof. It had been about two people discovering something essential in each other: strength, resilience, humanity. The ceremony ended. Guests began to leave. Daniel would stay until his shift finished, then go home to his small apartment. Take off the uniform, become ordinary again. But he wasn't ordinary. Not anymore. None of them were. They were survivors. They were people who'd stared down chaos and found the strength to keep moving forward. And that was worth more than any medal. As Daniel stood at his post, watching the golden light fade to dusk, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because the danger was over. Danger was always there, waiting. But because he knew that when it came again, he'd be ready. They all would be. That night during the storm had tested them, changed them, made them stronger, and in the quiet aftermath, in the rebuilt halls and the new safety protocols and the small private smiles across crowded rooms, they'd found something that mattered. Not just survival, but purpose. And that was everything.